Good evening to our show tonight. Tonight we're going to talk about feedback and feed forward. I was reading or listening to a book on my way for a little trip last weekend, and there was an author that had a book called The Feedback Fix. We're going to talk about it. His name is Joe Hirsch, and I think we're going to learn something fun as we are going to do the event today. Welcome to the show today. My name is Alain Faber, and I've been teaching science in high school at the high school level and French and other courses for the last 25 years. And I'm here to chat about topics about teaching, learning, and leadership. So hopefully you will enjoy the show. If you have any questions or comments, don't hesitate to put them in the comments below. Let's make sure that we have the sound today so that make sure and we have people able to listen, so that's outstanding. So tonight's topic is about feedback, and you all know, if you've been to school, you're part of a family, you have a job, the head of a company, there are always people giving feedback. Often we're asking people to give feedback so that you have a good understanding of the experience of the students, the people in the organization, or let's say for a semester, something that just finished, and we just want to know how things was. And I think feedback is a great way of doing things. And in my mind, I've always given feedback and trying to be as positive as possible. And then I heard a few weeks ago, someone mentioning about, it was called Feedforward. Not having heard the word in English before, I did some research and then came up with this gentleman here that has his book. Let's see if I can put it like this. There we go. It's called The Feedback Fix. And so his name is Joe Hirsch, or Hirsch. That's a good question. And his book, The Feedback Fix, Dump the Past, Embrace the Future, and Lead the Way to Change. And I thought it was interesting. So I figured I listened to his podcast. I listened to his book last weekend. And you know what? I learned something that was interesting. And as much as feedback is amazing, Feedforward is a game changer. And we're going to chat about that tonight. And I think it's quite fun. Now, some of you would say, well, why would we want to talk about feedback? Well, the main reason is, as a teacher, often when I give feedback to my students, often they look at their mark and they don't look at the feedback. And they just put their evaluations on the side. So what happens is students end up doing similar things over and over again. And positive changes don't always happen as fast as needed. What's beautiful in my science class is that I always tell them that there's the knowledge section of our course, but there's always the application side of our course. And the application side is always open book. That means that if we're doing our first lab in the first month, and then first week actually, and then we're looking at how we report and communicate our findings, then I tell them that when I give them feedback, I want them to use that report or their graph or whatever they said to be used for the second one, the third one, the fourth one. And it's always open book. And the plan is always to tell them, look at my comments because the next one will be better. And by the time we finish a semester, let's say 6 months, 5 months down the road, and we have a final performance task and there's a lab to do a report, you need to tell me about their findings. Usually their results, whatever they share with me, is always outstanding. The marks are amazing. And you will see, well, are the marks always amazing? But what's interesting about the science is that if you have a question and a hypothesis and you try to answer that question, if your experiment works well and then you have great results, then you can talk about that. If you do your experiment and there's terrible results, you have two things. You can either tell me about what you've learned with the bad results, or you have time to actually redo the activity so that you can do an even better job afterwards. So in science, that way, it works amazingly well. So what we're going to do today, we're going to divide this, this podcast in 3 parts. The first part will be about the student's perspective, the second about the teaching or the teacher's perspective, and then we will have the leader's perspective as a third part. And I'm sure that you will love that. So let's see. With respect to the students' perspective. Now, you have to keep in mind that during a class, if you're a trainee and you go to a class to learn something new, if you for your company, you need to learn a new skill or new software. If you are an electrician or someone in construction, you're learning something new. What happens is that you are sitting somewhere and then you are getting the information. And the trainer or the teachers will always give you some feedback about how things have happened. Now, what's interesting is that we always think of feedback. Feedback has been given for a long time, and we know what to expect. Often they tend to be some good points. Some other times they say things that could improve, and sometimes they say things that didn't work and that something that needs to change. But what's interesting is that instead of giving feedback, if students look at them as a feed forward. So instead of for students to, well, whatever I've done, it's over, it's the past. It's important for them to say, okay, what if I took the information and I looked at them as a feed forward? So what does that mean, feed forward? That means that you are looking at the comments to say, okay, this is what I've done up to this point, and let's see if I can use the information so that I can reimagine the future, meaning that the information given, the input given by the teacher, for example, or leader, will help me to be better in the future. So that means that that information feeds our little voice inside us, and often our little voice will allow us to do much more. That's one thing I enjoyed about the book from Joe Hirsch, is the fact that he's mentioning that when you have a feed forward, that means that someone is giving you some ideas so that you can use them to feed who you are and therefore do better next time. He talks a few times about using feedback as micro messages given to you so that you can be better the next time. Because keep in mind that our little voice here or here, sometimes it's not always the most positive voice. People sometimes are reminds, well, you cannot do it, you won't make it next time, why bother? And often we end up with more negative thoughts, especially when we have feedback. We look at the feedback saying, well, I did all I could up to this point. I get the feedback. It's part of the past. Why should I care? And why would this help me in the future? So here, there's a point here where students need to look at the perspective, seeing, okay, so the comments received by someone you are learning from can actually help you to be better. So seeing the feedback as feed forward to get you to the next level. Because keep in mind that if you receive feedback, you can't control the past. It's done. There's nothing you can do. It's already done. What's done is done. So what else could you do? If you are thinking of feedback, sometimes people are not reading it. However, if you look at the input that is given to you to be better, then there's a few things you can do. First of all, you can control the future. So that means that that's true that feedback is about the past, but let's see if you can look at this as clues to move forward. I think that's a fun way to look at it. The next one here is that if you are looking at comments as feed forward, it allows you to grow more, to grow for the future. And the next note I have here is it increases the pride of learning. Because if someone is giving you ideas and all you can think of is that the ideas are for the past, then how can you use that to be able in the future? And you have to keep in mind that not all teachers, not all leaders are able to communicate positively when you are learning. And that's something I think that when you're a learner, you have to keep in mind. And I know that because when I do videos sometimes, and you have people that are giving sometimes positive comments, but sometimes very negative comments, what happens is that I can use these comments saying, okay, I did a video, I had comments, I had input. Someone didn't like it, so let's see, what can I learn from it? And then I can move forward that way. Because if I was thinking of a hater's perspective and say, okay, that person must be right, and therefore I should my energy should go down because of that person. Because keep in mind that sometimes if you're with a group of friends or when you're in a classroom, so you could have 10 people telling you positive ways to improve, positive comments, and you feel good. And sometimes even if 10 people told you positive things, but only one person gives you a negative comment, sometimes you take that negative comment and you let it drag you down, whereas it was just one comment out of 11 comments. And that's something to look into. And one of my mentor, his name is Evan Carmichael, he always says that if you have someone who gives a negative comment, uh, so you have to keep in mind that that person took the time to give negative input or feedback, and how sad this person must be or negative that person must be to actually take the time to give such comments. And if you keep that in mind, you can look at it, see what you can learn from it, and move forward. And I think that is a key part right here. So this is my first portion for this podcast about the learner's perspective. Let's see if we can look at the teacher's perspective. So for my perspective, I give some examples for my classroom and see what we can learn from it. Perfect. I have some notes. It's always important. Okay. So let's see. Okay. So as a teacher, in the last few years, I've been trying to be bringing more positive comments, positive vibes in my classroom, allow students to give more answers, to get my students comfortable with sharing the information they know, give feedback, raise their hand to ask questions, participate more. And that's something I've been working hard in the last couple of years, and it's doing amazing. My students are talking quite a bit. It's chatty. They ask questions. It's very vibrant in an atmosphere, and I enjoy it tremendously. Because I realized that if you give feedback and they're not always positive, what happens is that you end up creating a group of students who know that feedback is coming to you. Some of the feedback may or may not be positive. Students may or may not look at the feedback. And therefore, the teachers feel that maybe the classroom is not doing as well as it could. So it's all creating a situation that is not always positive. On the other hand, if you are looking at students in your classroom as, so for example, you are looking at each individuals as being humans with talents, and you're trying to improve their talents, then what happens is that you are investing energy, both teachers and students, so that in your environment, in your classroom environment, in your school environment, even your community environment, to make it better. And I think that's quite amazing. So let's see. So here, when you are being positive, so instead of, so I give feedback, but always with, so I did not know how to put it into words. Now I know it's to share feed forward. And I do understand that by doing that, it does a few things. I took some notes here. The first one here is that it increases engagement. When students are engaged in the class, it's always more fun. I call it sometimes controlled chaos. Activities are there, questions are happening. And even though we go on tangents once in a while, we are using students' interest in what we're doing. So much better. Second, it increases the growth mindset of the students. Because keep in mind that when I have students coming to me in grade 9, by the time I finish with them at the end of the semester in grade 9, the next part in science will be in grade 10. So I need to bring them to a situation where they need to grow. And by the time I get them, and by the time they're ready to leave, the mindset has to be already at the next level. And in order to do that, positivity is a must. That's my perspective, indeed. The next one is that when you have a great comments and great feed forward, I feel that it increases satisfaction, but here in two parts. It increases personal satisfaction in knowing that my students come to my class, they know they're going to do activities, they're going to take some risk, they need to learn something. They might not get it the first time, but if they feel that growth is happening, they end up with personal satisfaction, and it always brings positive environment. The next one here is the increased work satisfaction. That means that when they're doing activities, they're doing collaboration, they're doing a lab report, or even a test sometimes, what happens is that they are seeing it as contributing to the class. So the beauty of students doing presentations in the classroom is that it allows students to see other students, how they're doing much better. And it's uh, so much more interesting for them, but so much more interesting for teachers as well. So we have Prairie Dogs. Here we have Cindy with Prairie Dodgers. Nice to see you tonight. Always a pleasure. And here we have Hawkstrike Edu. How would you encourage the feed forward mindset rather than feedback? That's a good question. I think what I'm going to do starting this September is so I always have a section at the bottom of when I hand in like work back, report, and so on. I have a section I usually call it comments related to the evaluation. So instead of writing comments, I think I'm going to write the feed forward input instead. So if I put it in the title, then students will see it as feed forward and not as a feedback. Because here, Hawkstrike Edu, if you're a teacher or you work with teachers, they will tell you that often students don't even read their the feedback, and then it's frustrating for teachers because they are giving ideas for them to be better. However, the students are not taking those comments or that feedback to get better. But I do feel that, and I think I need to train the students as well. So I'm looking into how to introduce it in September with the instead of saying feedback, call it feed forward. And something I've done in the last several, actually, probably in the last 20 years, is that every so often I ask for feedback for my students. I call it feedback, usually at week 5 and sometimes at week 12 or so. And then at the end of a semester, week 20, I'm asking for feedback on how was the course for them, what they liked, what they didn't like, so that it could do better the following year. But I think instead of calling it feedback, I think I'm going to call it feed forward, so that I will work with my students for them to tell me feed forward as well. So I think that will be a great way to build a sense of community in my classroom. So the sense of community in my classroom has been very nice in the last couple of years. And I think it's always for me to learn new tricks and new ways to help students feel more engaged in what we do. So Hawkstrike Edu, hopefully that will help. That is my first thing here with respect to students. I can share another part that I'm also looking into is that during a semester, so for the last 4 semesters actually, so for the last 2 years, what I do is I send usually a class. I mean, I work in high school. So often in high school, parents receive news from the teacher when there's an issue or when there are reports. So usually I always send about 8 emails, and they're not for individual parents, but they are like classroom community emails where I add the student's email and both parents' email. If there's one parent, then there's only one. And the reason for that is that I realized how much more positive the environment was. First of all, for the first email, usually a couple of days before I start the semester, I introduce myself and share information about the course, what we're planning to do, and welcoming them to the community that will be working together. So that's my first one. My second email usually is on week 2. I've shared with them what we've done so far. And if it happens that I've seen very generically, but I make it positively saying, thank you very much for signing the permission form so far. If you have forgotten, please remind your child to have it signed. And then I share what is the first unit in science, especially what we've done, if we've done a lab, and so on. And then we go to week 4, same thing. And then the other one is usually week 7 and week 8. And what I do for that one is that I send usually a printout of all the marks I've received so far. And I do that because I share with them. This is the mark I've accumulated so far. If you see some zeros in the listing, it means that I have not received yet the project, or I have not received yet the report that was due a couple weeks ago. So what happens usually at week 7, usually week 8, I receive a lot of reports, a lot of projects that were due before that was not done yet. So what happens is that they're coming in. And the reason why I think it works nicely is that we have midterm report for week 9. So it allows students to always have the best mark they can, because there's no point in waiting till week 15 or 16 to get all the projects. May as well to be happy about that. Now, by the time we get to midterm, I've got week 0, week 2, week 4, week 7. I have 4 group email that I've sent to all my parents and students. So everybody is together. I blind copy all of the names so that nobody sees their for confidentiality reason. And I find that the beauty of that is that their parents can discuss with their child about what we've done in class. Sometimes they have more conversations. Parents can share what they do at work. And I find there's a lot more discussion. I know that because usually by week 5 or 6, we have our first parent-teacher evening. And during that time, for the most part, in the last couple of years, parents don't come to see me to say, okay, I got to talk to you. Because all these emails open the door for parents to send an email saying thank you for sharing, or to ask questions. Say that there's some trips happening here and there. If students are having difficulties, then we can have a discussion. So all of it is much more, it's like a community, and we're all working together. So we have parent-teacher night. They're coming to, it's not that they have to see me, but they get to know me. And that makes a big difference. So the perspective of the meeting is quite different. It is quite nicely. And the idea of the email, it opens up transparencies. And I always tell my students that when I send an email to parents, their names are there as well. So everybody is aware of what's happening, and I think it's nice. So that's 4 emails by midterm, and I usually do one, usually week 10. So sharing to parents and students that we've all done we've passed the midterm, everybody is going positively. And usually by the time we do the midterm, I always do in my title, positive updates for my class. So I say course code, positive update, and I share a few things. And during that time, I share what we're doing. We're ending a unit, we're starting a new one. And I say, if you have any questions about what we're learning, tell your child. So communication is happening quite nicely. So by that time, if some students have had difficulties, we've had a chance to talk with parents, talk with students, and then we can involve other resources in the school to help those students. So that's quite nice. And then by the time we go to week 17, usually there's another email, and I tell parents that this is my last email from the semester, sharing that we're done the main topics. We have the final performance tasks for the end of the semester. And then I add a last one, wishing them a next, like a positive second semester or a great summer. And then what happens is that I'm doing that to build the community, my classroom community, not just in my class, but outside, but also to try to help build the community in the school. Because I teach grade 9 students for the most part, and we are doing from grade 9 to 10, no, grade 9 to 12. I always try to have students to feel involved, parents to be happy or happier, and therefore they have 4 years with us to do amazing things. So this is what I do. And so I think I've done quite a few things for feeding forward positive messaging, but I just did not have the word. It's a new word I learned, which is feed forward, which is exciting. So great question there. So let's see. Something that I liked from Joe Hirsch in his book, Feedback Fix, he's talking about the fact that when you have students, what you have to work with, and I liked what he said, was that you need to show students where to look and not what they see. And I think it's interesting because when we are If you show students what to see, they will focus on what needs to be seen, but they may not look at the big picture. Whereas if you tell students or your trainees to, you direct their vision to see, to, okay, I need to look at this again. I need to show them where to look. I think it has a more positive outlook, because if you are doing that, you're not creating people that can give you ideas, but you can actually help your students become better problem solver. You can expand the ideas of possibilities, but because sometimes as a teacher, you have an idea in mind, but students are looking at different perspective. So they can see things that you don't quite see. And therefore, you need to welcome that as well, because you have students with different perspective, different interests, and that's what makes a classroom exciting. So I think this is quite nice for the teacher's perspective. And that will bring us to the third segment of this podcast tonight, which is about the leadership's perspective. Now, when I think of leader, I think of, so it could be a leader in the school, but it can also be a teacher as a leader in their classroom. It could be a coach, which is leading their team. There could be teenagers that are leading either their brothers and sisters if they take care of little ones, if they have tutoring jobs and so on. But it could also include, let's say, a team manager, even a CEO. The whole idea here of leader is that it's the talent to be able to influence others to do amazing. So that's what is leadership for me. So let's see. So as a teacher, often I have leaders coming in my classroom and doing evaluation. They're teachers, let's see, the TPA. So teaching professional viewing. I forget what the letter stands for. Interesting. Anyway, they come and see me. They sit in my classroom. They take some notes. Then they give some feedback saying, okay, from what I've seen, it's great. You can teach in our school for the next while. So what's interesting is that often it's like a snapshot, a picture of what's happening in a classroom. If you are, let's say, a team manager, if someone is as a leader, you can sometimes take a picture of your team, and then you can give feedback. But the whole idea of feedback sometimes is one-way street. And therefore, if you want to grow as a company, as a leader, you need to be able to have more collaboration. So that's part of this feeding forward and collaborate for everybody to get better. So here are some points to keep in mind. So as a leader, you want to bring and give more feed forward for the following reason. First, for the first one is about talent development. Now, what's interesting is that if you tell some people love to be told what to do, they do that and they're happy. Whereas others, as I mentioned earlier, they just want to know the vision, and from there, they'll be able to do amazing things. So in order to, as a leader, being able to improve, to make available talent development allows for the talents in the group, the talents in your classroom, the talents in your community, to see something differently, to bring new ideas, and for them to feel valued so they can bring more value to the organization. And that's important because you want to keep your talent in your team. There's no point in spending a lot of energy, investing time and resources to improve talents. But if they're not happy, they might go somewhere else. So here, developing talents to make them that they feel valued. That's the key thing here. The next one, you have to keep in mind that when you are giving feed forward for your team, for people that are working with you, it's not an expense, but it's an investment. Keeping in mind that you always want to have growth. If you have a company, you want your company to grow. In order to do that, you can indeed hire new people for your company to grow it, but you can have your inside talent to get even better, to create better products and make it amazing. And I think that's quite nice. Because keeping in mind that In a classroom, for example, when students are coming to my class, I don't choose the students. They come in and that becomes my team. And all I have to do from that point on is to see these are talented individual, and I want all of them to move forward. And I think that idea of feed forward is amazing. I have this one. The next note I have here is help people lead changes. Oh, yes. So a leader, what they will do, a leader needs to help people. Let's see. Okay, let's see if it makes sense. It goes like this. Help people lead the change instead of pushing them. Oh, there you go. So if as a group, as a leader, you want to go somewhere, I think the key thing is to show people where to look. That's a vision, that the mission of the group here, the mission of the organization, you have a long-term vision for the individual in your group to know where to go. And from there, you want to lead them to lead the change that they will bring. I think that's so much better because you will talk to them, their inside voice. They will look at the feed forward, your comments. They will make those comments theirs so that people can move forward. And in a company, you may have seen some people feel that they belong to the company, they belong to the vision, and therefore they will give more energy to the cause. If some people don't feel that they're attached to the situation, attached to the vision, or they feel there's no goal, they will stay a little bit and then go somewhere else. So the whole idea here is that you want to lead the change you want to see. And you don't want to push people, because if you want to push people, that means that you're pushing them in a direction that as a leader you may think is great, but then for the people you're with, they may not see the same perspective as yours. And therefore, it's a lot more energy than just having a chance for them to move forward. I think that's the key part. I think that's something to look into for leaders. And here, something in mind, keep in mind that if you're a parent, you are also a leader in your family. And that's the same thing. You want to lead the change in your family instead of pushing people in the ways you want things. Often it works better. I'm not telling you that anything goes and everybody can do anything they want. I'm just saying that if you can help to lead the change instead of pushing people, you'll see it has a more positive outlook and output as well. So let's see. I have here at the back, when I talked about the fact that you need to show students where to look and not what to see, I have the best feedback comes from within. So when you give feedback, it's something that is an information about past action, past behavior. And people may not pay attention as much as if you are paving the path for feed forward, where people can look at this information and say, okay, I have this information. Let's see if I can make it mine so that I can be driven for change. And I think feeding forward or feed forward is so much more powerful than feedback. And this is the topics I have for you tonight. We'll see if there's any of you that have any questions related to the topics I've covered tonight. So tonight's topic comes from, and I'll share it with you right here. So I went for a road trip and I was listening to this audiobook called The Feedback Fix by Joe Hirsch. And I'm going to see if I know that he has a YouTube channel, so I'm going to put in the comments below before, as soon as I edit this video, I will put the link for his TEDx talk, and also a link to his website. I'm not making any money on any of his things. I think that he has a great perspective on how to make an organization better. And here, as a teacher, I want my classroom environment to be the best it can be. So let's see if there's any comments coming from the audience. If you have any questions and you see this as a replay, don't hesitate to put any of your questions or clarification questions in the comments below. I always look at them, and it's always a pleasure to see your perspective on my videos. On this, I'm going to wish you an amazing evening. throughout the summer, I'm going to continue my Wednesday evening podcast. I think it's a fun thing to do. And it's always nice to see the community learn as I learn as well. On this, have an amazing evening, and I'll see you next Wednesday. Take care. There we go.